In this short video, I'm going to talk a little bit about writing an introductory paragraph, especially when you are writing a research paper. So in general, an introduction is the opening of your paper, and it introduces the reader to your topic or your discussion of a specific research subject. And your introduction needs to do a couple of different things. So it needs to grab your reader's attention. It needs to introduce this topic that you're looking at. It has to provide a little bit of background information if necessary, making sure that your reader is up to date or aware of what this issue entails. You need to sort of provide the main ideas presented in your research paper. If it's a question that you're going to ask, or there's a guiding question to your research, that should also be included. You need to also include your thesis statement, and this is going to be your argument or your final sort of conclusions around the topic, having done the research on it. And it's going to also do a sort of an outline or structure the paper, show a kind of outline of what the rest of the paper is going to discuss. So in a way, it does present a sort of plan or covers the main points of your argument for the rest of the paper. Okay, so let's take a look at this introduction. So this one is about plant-based eating, so like a vegetarian topic, I guess. And the question here, is it healthy for all? So this is sort of the guiding research question that this person was trying to answer, whether or not plant-based eating is right for everybody, or if there's some exceptions, or they were going to try to find some research about that topic. So we want to just, we'll start sort of going through line by line and seeing what this person is doing correctly or what they could do better. So the first sentence here, they say you are what you eat. If this is true, then we can assume that those who eat a plant-based vegetarian diet are healthy, strong, and full of essential nutrients. So this first sentence, this is what we call the hook, or it sort of sets the tone for the rest of the paper. A hook is just a way, a fancy sort of word to describe hooking your reader's attention and engaging the reader in the discussion. So it could be, you have various options of how you hook the reader. You could, this one is sort of being clever and taking a kind of more lighthearted approach to the topic. You could, start with an example, or you could start with a quotation, or provide a background information on why this topic is important or relevant at this time in history. So yeah, you can basically just sort of start quite broadly introducing your reader to the topic, and here you can use maybe a little bit more creativity than you would in the rest of the paper, just as a way to sort of hook your reader's attention. This next part, so while there are many different types of vegetarianism, from lacto-vegetarians who consume dairy to ovo-vegetarians who eat eggs, and vegans who do not, sorry, this should be changed here, who do not consume dairy, eggs, or any products derived from animals, all forms of a vegetarian diet carry some health benefits. Okay, so that's our next sentence. So what this one is doing is basically giving a little bit of background information to the reader. It's defining what they mean by plant-based eating, and they've given us 3 sort of separate categories here of different types of vegetarians or different types of plant-based eating. And they kind of put them all together at the end and say all forms of the vegetarian diet carry some health benefits, and then they cite some research on that um, to, to sort of paraphrase their research findings. So I'm going to assume after reading this that this paper is going to discuss some of the benefits of a healthy or a plant-based diet based on their citing of research. But it is good to sort of define your topic in some way to clarify for your readers what it is exactly that you're talking about. So are you talking about, even if it was your topic was diabetes or something like that, you want to make sure that you're clearly defining what that topic is. So whoever's reading it has the same idea, same understanding of what we're talking about that you do. So we're all on the same page now. And then next sentence here. So, however, there are those who refrain from eating a plant-based diet for various reasons, including the idea that it is cost prohibitive, nutrient deficient, and too restrictive for one's lifestyle. So who is right? Okay, so we'll just label that one. So in this case, they're clearly presenting some counter arguments as well. So these are the various reasons why someone might not want to follow plant-based eating, and they've mentioned various reasons why somebody might say, no, thanks for me, I don't want to follow a plant-based diet. So yeah, that's basically presenting counter arguments, which I think is always a good idea in any research paper. You want that kind of counterpoint to the topic in order to make there some sort of tension or a little bit of debate around the topic. Otherwise, it's not really an argument. So you want to address both sides of an issue in some regard. Even if you fall, maybe you lean towards one side over the other, it's good to sort of always acknowledge that there are others who think differently from you, and that there are other viewpoints out there that exist. And it's also a good way to sort of address some of these counter arguments, and you can always, counter them in your argument. So if someone says it's cost prohibitive, there's always an example where you could present a counter argument saying, well, no, it's not cost prohibitive. It's actually very affordable if you do this, this, and this. So it's good to acknowledge the counter arguments within your research paper. And then we have the last sentence here. Following from our survey of recent scholarship on plant-based eating, we found that when plant-based eating followed certain guidelines around fat and sugar intake, then a plant-based diet does carry health benefits, including maintaining a healthy weight and reducing the risk of cancer, heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. So this would be the thesis statement, and it basically summarizes what these scholars have found to be true about this topic. So they've kind of answered their question. So they're saying they've done the scholarship now, they've done their research, and this is what they now see to be factual or truthful, or they have some confidence in this statement following from their research. So in this case, they found that when plant-based eating follows certain guidelines around fat and sugar intake, then it is healthy for these reasons. So they do make some sort of, they acknowledge that, it does have to follow certain guidelines. So they are making sort of some concession that possibly, there are some examples where plant-based eating could be unhealthy if it was all deep fried and full of sugar. So they want to sort of allow for a nuanced or specific argument in their thesis, rather than just saying, yes, it's always great. So you want your argument to be nuanced, and to do that you need to have specific points and address any sort of gaps or uncertainties within the topic. And so from this paragraph, we sort of see how you can formulate an introduction that's informative and engaging and provides background. It provides counter arguments or tension within the topic, and it also clarifies the thesis. So what can you, or what do you know for certain, or what can you say with some certainty about this research topic following from your research. And a thesis, a good thesis can also set up the main points of your argument and kind of be a sort of signposting or outline of what the rest of the paper will be talking about. So just underneath here, I have a kind of outline, loose outline of what the rest of this paper might look like. So I have research findings as the next large section after my intro. And then I'm going to talk about all of the research that I did on the benefits of plant-based eating. And then I've summarized 3 key points from my research. So I might mention articles in each of these sections. So healthy weight, nutrient rich, and prevention of disease were the 3 main points that I found in my research. If you were outlining further, you could, note which authors you will cite for each of these. So in this one, I'm going to look at my research that I did from Smith et al. In this paragraph, when they talk about nutrition, I'm going to talk about Jones and Carter. And then prevention of disease, I'm going to refer to the, American Medical Association. Or whatever it is that you have for your source. And then you're also going to have maybe another section where you talk about the counter arguments. So what are some drawbacks to this topic that you found also addressed in your research? So it was cost prohibitive, protein or iron deficient, too restrictive. You can present these arguments, and you can also counter these arguments within this section. So you could acknowledge that there are drawbacks, but you can also say, except, it doesn't apply in this case if you find, low cost vegetarian alternatives, or you can, eat ovo vegetarian rather than vegan for protein sources or whatever it is, right? So you want to also acknowledge counter arguments, but maybe also look at countering the counter arguments in some cases. And then you can follow it up with discussion. So this is where you actually kind of synthesize the information on both sides. And here you could do your counter arguments here as well. So you could present the drawbacks here and then counter them in your discussion. And then your conclusion will basically be a restatement of your key points and your thesis. So that's where you kind of want to restate your thesis statement and acknowledge any maybe further need to study this topic and various other questions that might still be needing to be answered following from your research. And you could also talk about the larger benefits of this research project. So could it be beneficial for others to read this paper? So that kind of thing. But you can basically see sort of how the outline of your paper follows somewhat what you've talked about in your intro. So we're kind of borrowing or using our intro as a starting off point for organizing the rest of our paper.